Good afternoon. I am Becky Arps, the incoming chair for SIM St. Louis. And on behalf of the St. Louis SIM chapter, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Carl Hammerschlag today as one of our chapter's commitments to supporting the SIM Foundation National Give Back Week activities. I would like now to introduce Eric Gorham, longtime SIM member, and to introduce Bob Rouse and Dr. Carl Hammerschlag.
Thank you, Becky. I would now like to introduce Bob Rouse, who will help us with the Q&A portion of our program today. As a member of SIM for more than 43 years, Bob has held numerous local and national board positions and has been RLF facilitator for 25 years. A founding member of the St. Louis SIM chapter, Bob's commitment to SIM and his community are just two of the ways he continues to give back of his time and to help others promote the IT profession. And now, on behalf of the St. Louis SIM chapter, I would like to introduce Dr. Carl Hammerschlag, a master storyteller, internationally recognized author, physician, speaker, healer, and humanitarian clown. Dr. Hammerschlag has left his mark on so many throughout his career. As an expert community-based health, he has spent more than 20 years working with Native Americans with a focus on integrating the principles of mind, body, and spirit medicine. As a humanitarian clown, joining Patch Adams, he has spread joy and healing in disaster areas, refugee camps, and institutions all over the world. A friend of SIM for more than 30 years, Dr. Carl has shared his stories with RLF participants through his books and in person. Many of us here today can vividly remember his ability to draw us into stories and experiences, especially through his writings in the Theft of the Spirit. I feel blessed to have known Carl for so many years and be able to hear him speak today and share his stories. A master storyteller and a friend of SIM. Thank you, Carl, for joining us here today. Carl?
I am unmuting. The technology almost always exceeds my capacity. Am I on in live?
Yes.
You can hear me?
You
Yes,
are
we can.
live.
Yes,
We are on and
we
live.
can hear
Thank
you.
Well, I appreciate that gracious introduction. To all of you in SIM, I am honored to be with you again. And as Erica suggested, some of us have been together more than 30 years. To all of you in the learning forums who've read my book and who continue to follow me in my schlag bites, you know, I'm delighted to speak with an audience that has some sensitivity to my not always ordinary viewpoints of the world. You know that my expertise is not in information technology. My experience and our experience together has been the many ways there are to share information with ourselves and with others. Together, we've explored ways to open channels into the unconscious mind, to talk to ourselves in ways that change our thinking and behavior. We have explored trance states, hypnoanesthesia. We have talked to each other using our hands, rubbing people's feet and telling stories with our fingers on the soles of people's feet and hearts. And today I want to talk to you about information in an age of disinformation, misinformation. In the midst of all of the chaos that we face, in short, I want to talk to you about how it is that we maintain some sense of health in an era in which telling the truth and being able to believe what people say and that the information that's shared is credible, comes with integrity. I want to talk to you today about how we sustain our souls in health. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. And then we'll have a Q&A, a spirited Q&A in which you can ask anything you want. You know, the hallmark of my style is spontaneity and passion. If I get so passionate that it takes my breath away, you will bear with me as well. How do we stay healthy? Well, first, let me tell you, health and truth are the same words in the Navajo language. Hojo, Hojo, spelled H-O-Z-H-O, Hojo. It's the same word for balance, harmony, beauty, truth, health, and the Great Spirit. It's a wonderful concept. Health is that when what you know with your head and what it is you say with your lips and by your actions and what you feel in your heart are all telling the same story. In this day and age, that's become an archaic myth of yesteryear. What it is that people say is not always what they mean, and what they do is not always what they believe, and what it is they feel is not always what it is that's articulated. And it's the setup for getting sick. And as a culture, we are in the midst of enormous chaos that is stealing from us both our joy and our ability to establish trusting relationships. Truth, health, is when what it is you know with your head and what you say and what you do are all telling the same story. It is one of the unfortunate concomitants of the scientific and industrial revolution, the idea that what you think is closer to the truth than what you feel. What it is you know with your head is the determining element of what is the truth. And we have subordinated that which we know to be true because we feel, because we intuit it. We suffer from a primacy of the head. It is unfortunate that we find a way to believe that everything can be answered, that our inability to answer the question is simply an inability to articulate it well, and that sooner or later everything can be known. And of course, when it comes to the existential questions, you know, the meaning and purpose of our lives and how it is that we spend our time, what it is we want to commit ourselves to and be remembered for, those questions don't lend themselves to that easy kind of answerability. Western technology kind of has a linear view of the world. Yes or no, you know it or you don't know it. It's a beginning or an end. And it's difficult to answer those really unanswerable questions from that perspective. So I wanted to tell you just a story from my own history in terms of questions and answers. I'm going to show you a picture. I wanted to show you a picture because you've always seen me do that, and I felt remiss in not doing so. Here's a picture of a medicine man, a trusted, beloved medicine man who had a profound influence in my growth. You can still see the black curly hair and that fuzzy Frito Bandito mustache, the signs of the 60s. His name is Bill Dalton, Soloho, the whistling arrow, a talented Hopi medicine man. I used to visit him and of course asked him questions. You can see me writing notes about the herbs that he would show me how they were used. I was sitting with him one day. I had asked him a question. And he said, "Let me tell you the story." He visited his son in Hawaii. He happened to be in the military. And as is the custom in Hawaiian visitors at the hotel, there was the customary luau with hula dancers and Hawaiian singers, and a well-known crooner was going to perform. And when he came up to the stage, he was hacking and excused himself and said that he could not sing, that his throat was hoarse. It had just come upon him and he'd be unable to perform, and a backup singer took his place. Bill went up to him at the end of the set and gave him an herb, said, this will ease your hoarse throat. And indeed, the following day, he performed and recognized Bill's contributions, said the Native American medicine man gave me this, and I am speaking. And the story was picked up in the local paper. And shortly afterwards, he was visited by some Hawaiian traditional healers, kahunas. And he was invited to join them for something they thought would be important for him and for them. And he said, you know, it was one of those Godfather-like invitations that you couldn't refuse. And he went with them. And they took him to a place isolated. It ended in a trail. They walked up a volcanic peak halfway, in which was carved an opening, a clear tunnel that led inside. As they entered, they picked up a torch, which was standing on the wall, and went into the enormity of this cavern, in the center of which there was a well that had been carved with steps leading down into it. The head kahuna says to Bill, come over here, I want to show you something. And he approaches the edge of this deep well and asks him, what do you see? And Bill says to me, I'm looking down, I see the water, and there are ripples in the water, but they are waves. They go from one side to the other. He says, you know, I see the water, I see that there are waves. And the kahuna says, how did they get there? And Bill says, you know, I know it's not an artesian spring because there are not concentric rings that are emerging from a central source. And I know there is no wind in this cave, and there's clearly no earthquake or rumbling. I don't know why there are waves. And I say, you know, I don't know why there are waves, but I know they're important. The kahuna smiles, strips naked, motions for Bill to do the same, and then invites him to climb down into the well, where he dips him and makes him an honorary kahuna. And he stops talking, and I, of course, say, well, you know, what's the rest of the story? I mean, tell me about the waves. And he says, they don't know why there are waves either. All they know is that when the waves stop, civilization will come to an end. And he looks at me and he says, you white men are all the same. You want to know the answers to the questions. He says, sometimes it's enough to know that the questions are important. Sometimes it's enough to know the questions are important. We are tasked as a species to always want to know more than is available to us. It doesn't matter how much we know. There is always more that we would like to know. And as a result, those unanswerable questions really have no answer. And if there is no answer, then no one way of answering them is any better. I want to share with you that the truth is not so much what is in our head as it is what we intuit and feel in our hearts. The really important questions, meaning and purpose questions, existential questions. The heart is closer to the truth because it has not yet been crippled with self-doubt. We still dare to imagine what's possible. We don't subordinate our dreams to science's sense as to whether or not they are achievable, whether it is indeed possible, even likely. Pay attention to what it is you feel in the heart. It is invariably closer to the truth than the pursuit of certainty. Certainty is almost always a tribute to fear and to arrogance. So I want to tell you my truth at this moment in time. For those of you who follow me and have read my Schlag bites, you know that over the last several years, I have been facing a serious cardiac illness. I have a terminal cardiomyopathy. I am getting shorter and shorter of breath. There is no definitive expiration date stamped on my bottle. It's more like getting a pink slip. Somebody kind of letting you know that there is an end to becoming. How is it that we come to our truth? How is it that we understand that it's not the events in our lives, whatever they are, from political, personal, medicinal, climactic, it's not the events in our lives that do us in, but the choices we make about how we come to those events. Stress is not an event, it's the reaction to an event. So I want to tell you, in these last 4 years, since the diagnosis has been made, how it is that I am coming to this event, what the secret is for productive participation. And I want you to hear it only because, for all of us, the horizon may be further away or closer, but we have some limited time. How do you want to spend your time? What do you want to be doing? What is it that reminds you of what you like best about who you are and what it is you do? And especially as information specialists in an age of misinformation, disinformation, and frank untruths, how is it that you're going to keep yourself together? My way of dealing with my truth is you find a way to stay engaged. You got to like what you're doing. You got to be engaged in the day. You have to be participatory, even if you can't do quite the same things in quite the same ways as you used to. But you can't somehow stay preoccupied with our losses. It's depressing. It's demoralizing because it makes it virtually impossible to be in the moment, because where you are is always subordinated to some sense of where it is you once were. The way it is not the way it was. The way it is the way it is. The way it was the way it was. If you got to know it as you once knew it, you can only do it like you've always done it. And you can't do it when you're facing new aspects in your life, from national leadership to facing your own competencies. Stay engaged in whatever ways that you can, and then find a way to come to every day with joy. You got to look forward to something. There has to be a sense that something's going to happen tomorrow that allows you to look forward. It would not, for me, be enough to have the only thing to look forward to being my next breath. Not enough. And frankly, I would like to have something to say about that at the end, and that's an issue we may talk about later on, but my strong feeling is we treat our debilitated, terminal animals better than we treat ourselves at the end of life. One has to find a way to look forward to every day with joy. And lastly, you have to somehow stay connected to something other than yourself, something you love. Surround yourself with people who make a difference in your life. But it doesn't have to be people. I mean, we need to be staying connected to something that reminds us that we are not alone in the world, that whatever it is we face, we are not alone. This is the antithesis of the old pop psychological dogma that suggests that whatever you face, it's you are the captain of your ship, you're number one, you got to paddle your own canoe. In the Maslowian hierarchy, autonomy, that sense of your centrality is the critical element to success. And I want to tell you, nobody makes it alone. Nobody makes it alone. We don't come into the world alone, and we are not sustained in it alone. We come connected to somebody other than ourselves and are reminded of it every day when we take a shower. Well, maybe not every day, but whenever I take a shower and wash myself and get a chance to look at my belly button, it's a living reminder that I was once connected to somebody other than me. And then we are nurtured before we are self-sustaining. We are not meant as a species to be isolated, divided, and unable to connect with each other in ways that remind us of what we like best about who we are and would prefer to do, and the message that we would like to leave behind. Nobody makes it alone. But you can't just connect to people. When I talk about connections, I'm talking about things that sustain you, that are dependable, that you know that somehow if you go to the place, or if you see the object, or if you remember the animal, that it fills you with a sense of peace and connection. I don't care whether it's old growth forests, whales, dolphins, the land that's been given to you by your ancestors for the last hundreds or thousands of years, but it's got to be something that reminds you that we are here together. It's critically important in this day and age, because unless we find a way to develop more trusting relationships, uh, unless we can believe that somehow what we say and that the information we share is what we believe and will act out on, it's going to be difficult for us to do business and have relationships with anyone. We need to find some way to remind ourselves, nobody makes it alone. Find things to connect to. Find things that ennoble the human spirit and that remind you that in each other's eyes, we would like to see those parts of ourselves that we like and honor the most. In this difficult and chaotic time, in which we are changing the world in which we live in, how we communicate, how we breathe, the quality of our air, the warming of the planet, the changing of boundaries, a global world in which we need to find a way to come together. We have the capacity to do that. And your information management specialists need to find a way to share the information with credibility and integrity. People have to trust you, like you, and they will trust the information you share. And it's not so much how quickly you can transmit it, how effectively you can share it, but how meaningfully and with integrity you can present it and stand behind it. In these difficult days and times, it is our job to be able to make those connections and understand that at the basic level, we are all relatives. In Indian country, they say goodbye, not goodbye. There is no beginning and end. That kind of linearity is not part of the conception. They say you want to be connected to everybody as if we are relatives, as if we are relatives. And we can be relatives with animals that fly and walk on four legs, that are winged, that swim. We can connect with stones. If you heat lava rocks in a sweat lodge and you believe that that steam that emerges is the breath of your grandfathers, you listen to that steam in a different way than when you get hot in a steam room. Come to the world as if we are a relational network, and we will be able to survive. And they end every presentation, and I like to as well, with this reminder. As the Lakotas say when they say goodbye, I say these things for all my relations. Mitakweyase. In blessings may you all walk. In joy may we continue to walk with beauty above us and around us and behind us. In beauty, may we walk. Mitakoyase. Thank you, relatives. A pleasure to be with you. And now the floor is yours.
Very good. So we're getting a few questions in, and there's an opportunity to do more as you think about what we're doing here. Carl, one of the listeners, one of the attendees, pointed out that you're one of the greatest storytellers that we have today. And he's curious about how you developed that ability to use your stories to tell more than just the details, to kind of get at the meaning. What advice would you have to share about that?
We are all storytellers. So the first thing that we want to accept, everybody's got a story to tell that somebody else needs to hear. And everybody's got to listen to a story that somebody else has got to tell. It's the way we make sense of our lives. We don't have to continue to repeat history. We keep making believe that all history is the history of our own time, that there's nothing to learn from those who have come before. But we all know that as a species, we have hardly developed in the last 100,000 years in terms of what it is that we are capable of feeling. We feel the same things our Cro-Magnon ancestors felt. The nature of our humanity is to feel aggression and fear and sadness and pleasure, and there are only so many things that are the gamut of the human experience. So we have something to learn with how other people have dealt with all of that stuff. We need to pay attention to that instead of continuing to relive what it is that we've already done and learn it ourselves, thinking that history is just our time. So the question about the story is, those things that have been impactful in your life. How do you tell this story? Well, first you tell it to yourself. You acknowledge what it is that you've learned, and you find a way to articulate it. My way of telling a story is I have an experience, I write it down. I meet somebody, I hear something, I write a little note, and I give it a beginning. There is some kind of conclusion. It's the same way you write a book. It's the same way you want to write a paper. There has to be some context, there has to be some flow, and there has to be somehow an introduction, some kind of conflict, and some kind of conclusion. Some kind of confrontation and some kind of learning. And then you find a way to put it together. I don't tell my stories by rote. I don't write them down. I trust that what comes from my heart to my lips will more closely approximate the truth than what it is that I have prepared and exactly organized. I think that it is in that passionate spontaneity that allows you to speak from a place in which it's more like a prayer than a speech. A speech, you think about, you prepare it, and then you articulate it on the basis of how it's going to be received, whether people will like it or like you. A prayer is a song that comes from the heart. It goes directly from the heart to the tongue without having to pass go, think about it in Broca's area of speech, and then decide to articulate it on the basis of its potential reception. Trust that aspect and tell the stories that remind you of what it is you like best about how it is that you now come to the world as a result of that experience you want to share.
Excellent. Great advice. So one other listener asked the question about the importance of information in kind of managing ourselves and our businesses. um, and the need for measuring what we do in order to manage it. In fact, I think learning to manage often is learning how to make the measurements that allow you to make decisions.
Well, let me first say, this is not my expertise. Measurements, analysis, test, retest, reliability, rotating the variables, applying all the equations. I quiver in desperation just in the anticipation of having to do it. But it's critically important in what you do. I mean, you manage information and you share a distinct responsibility for getting it to people who need it and be able to use it in ways that continue to allow the organization, the business to function, and yourself as well. I learn from the experience. I try to somehow not repeat the same things in the same old ways, but I don't do it well. You do need to do it. There have to be some measurements. But I don't want you to subordinate the measurement to the quality of the information, the material.
Mm-hmm.
What it is you share, as well as what it is you measure, is at least as important. You need to somehow tell it as it is, not as you would imagine it to be. You can't make believe, not in what you say and not in the numbers you present, not in the test results that you present. In this age of disinformation, essentially any fact can be fudged and anything can be true and you can find anybody to support it. And there are legions who will march. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, you're lying. It's difficult. You need to present not only the information, but your sincerity, the reality of who you are, that you come to the work, not just as a technician, but as a human who believes that the work is important and that what you're saying is what you're believing and that what it is that you believe is how it is you're acting and doing. And I encourage you to do that. There are some of us who do that well. Use your strengths, but above all, use all of your strength, not just the science and the technology of what you do and its results and applicability, but the integrity, the authenticity of who you are. This is an age in which there is a desperation for authenticity, truth, balance, harmony, health.
Another attendee likes your point about never being alone and asks the question, we hear so much about the loneliness people are experiencing, particularly during the pandemic, augmented by all the other uprisings and issues we're facing. So with all this connectivity, how can people be lonely?
It's interesting, we are all in the midst of this chaos, suffering from a sense of insecurity, that the old credible norms are no longer dependable, that everything that we once believed in, from governments to organizations to the judiciary to law enforcement, that what it is that's happening is not all that's going on in terms of what's shared and spoken.
Mm-hmm.
We are distanced, unsupported, and it intensifies our loneliness and despair. On the other hand, look at the ways in which we have learned to connect. I mean, here I am speaking to a large number of people. I have not spoken publicly very often. I had difficulty early on with the vulnerability of it. That is, could I present myself in truth? as somebody who was getting short of breath. And if I got anxious and my heart beat fast and I became arrhythmic, that I would get lightheaded. I did not want to reveal that aspect of my truth. And it was isolating me. I need to connect. And then I discovered that I could do it on Zoom, that there were people all over the world with whom I could connect, even if I wasn't there. We dramatically have underutilized this instrumentation in the past. And now we will never be the same since doing it. I don't care whether you connect with your fraternity brothers that you haven't seen in 30 years, whether your old college roommate with whom you had a wonderful relationship, people that you have worked with in the past, sit down for happy hours with friends. You need to somehow reach out. And even if you cannot touch them, I mean, physically, you can feel them. You can feel me. I can feel you. I can still see your face as I saw it 30 years ago in Phoenix at the Dooley Group. I still have that sense. You want to somehow magnify those connections, seek them out, and remind yourself that even in these times, that we need to be connected and we need to find more ways to actively listen rather than talk. We spend so much time defending simply our own point of view that we listen only long enough to give an answer. It's not the listening that we're really interested in. It's simply our opportunity to respond virtually, reflexively, and from a definitive point of view. We need to be listening as well as we are speaking. If we, and certainly in this country, cannot listen to what each other is saying without somehow raising arms and becoming more divided, more entrenched, guarding our boundaries more intensely, we will never be able to move beyond the impasses. If we find a way to talk together, to actively listen better, it will deal with our insecurities and fears and also attenuate our loneliness. Find ways to reach beyond yourself.
Many ways, that's a challenge and something we need to reflect upon. Won't come to us automatically.
No.
So we're living through a period where, from the standpoint of social and economic and cultural perspective, we're also dealing with the COVID-19. How do you think we should think about COVID and how do you think we should forge ahead?
Listen, there's going to be an end to this. That end is not now. We are not yet around the bend. We have more cases, more hospitalizations. The pandemic continues. The fat lady has not yet sung. We are all vulnerable. I have difficulty with vulnerability. I am afraid of, that sense of weakness it implies, which is kind of how I used to think about it. Vulnerability was synonymous with fear, weakness, out of controlledness. And you come to discover that as you get older and more vulnerable and sick, that vulnerability is simply an opportunity for new growth. Vulnerability is an opportunity for new growth. That means, you got to be facing something big to make changes, because most of us don't want to change. And we can almost always find more reasons to keep doing the same old thing in the same old way. So if you're looking for reasons to perpetuate the status quo, you will always find more of those than you will find reasons to make change. We need to make some changes when it comes to COVID. We need to be protecting each other. We need to be giving a consistent message. We can't keep dividing us. We are a nation. We ought to be out there taking care of ourselves and each other. And to remember that none of us are here alone, and that we all love this place that has sustained us and our families for some millennia. And to find a way to make room for that growth. The deer, they don't shed their antler because it's a time of great vulnerability. The birds molt their feathers, a great vulnerability. Lobsters, they lose their carapace, they're vulnerable, but it's the only way they grow.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a time of great vulnerability, both from pandemic and from global economic potential disaster, and a distancing, a hardening of the lines between people. We have to use that vulnerability as an opportunity for growth. Our leadership is not going to change that. We have to change the foundation of how it is that we come and hear each other. Our willingness to understand that people say things and do things differently. How can we make some accommodation, not by resisting, but allowing us to be vulnerable and to look again at everything we thought we knew? The way it was is not the way it is. And if you have to know it before you do something, you're only going to do what you've always done. You've heard me say this before.
Right.
This is not a heroic journey. This is not the journey of heroes. We're in a place that we haven't been in 100 years. We need to find a way to come to it differently and grow.
Yeah. Well, we certainly are challenged in many ways at this point in time. And I know a lot of young families who have really grown together in a way that they never would have without it. So,
Yeah,
absolutely.
families are having difficulty, spending 24/7 teaching your children, working a job. I mean, these are difficult times. I'm concerned about education, what our kids are going to learn, how it is that we're going to go to school in the future.
Right.
We need to find a way to come together, do it with others. Nobody can do it alone. Parents getting together. It's a difficult time. And many people have found innovative ways to address it. And we have to continue to do that in this moment until we really do get beyond the bend.
Right. Right. And we will. But take a little time and patience.
Indeed.
So one other question that's come in asks, how are you dealing with the stress of your pink slip?
Well, I appreciate the question. How do I deal with it? There are days it's harder for me to deal with. I mean, I'm dealing with my own issues. We're dealing together with familial kinds of issues, and those stressors take a toll. If I focus on the toll and the loss, then it's very difficult to be in the moment. I always understood, that Buddhist philosophy of the importance of being in the moment, but I didn't really understand it until I got the pink slip. What it means to deal with being in the moment. This is the day. This is the day. Zehayam Asa Hashem. This is the day that the Creator makes. How are you going to come to the day? This day. And if you can find a way to come to this day, engaged, celebratory, I have discovered a sense of appreciation and gratitude that I may have always felt in the past, but had more difficulty in articulating. I say it more. I feel it more. It is in that sense of gratitude that allows me to appreciate this kind of here and now quality, and appreciate the preciousness of this moment. My ability to still have an opportunity to come and share the story with somebody who would still want to hear it, to continue to be surrounded by people who share some ethic of morality, a sense of values, a desperation for that in our culture, brings me peace, whatever the awareness of what the future holds in store. And for me, I mean, just so you know, for me, a belief in a celestial being enthroned in a jewel embedded seat in the heavens, passing judgment and welcoming me, is not something I respond to in a personal way, but energetically. The gifts that we share with each other. Energy, as the physicists remind us, is transferable. I mean, mass can be created and destroyed. You can make it smaller, bigger, make it explode. Energy manifests itself in different forms. This form will leave. That's just the biology of what it means to be alive on the planet. I mean, the Grand Canyon may take 1,000,000 years to somehow make changes. Water etches that stone slowly. An elephant may live 200 years. Human beings may extend their longevity, who knows, 120.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, there is movement, there is change. You want to come to that with a sense that energetically what you leave behind are the stories that you've told, the people you've touched, and the love that is shared. I mean, it's always the loving connections that we leave behind that are what make the difference. We don't take anything with us. It's what we leave behind. And that, it gives me comfort. And as long as somebody is listening to the story, right? As long as somebody says, you remember my grandpa, my friend, do you remember that time in the hotel when we took our shoes and socks off and told stories about what happened to us before we were 10 years old, to the soles of somebody's feet without looking at them? The stories that remind us that the energetic light is still on.
Right. Well, I'm certain that the experience people had telling stories to other people's souls won't be forgotten. I can't tell you how often that event in Philadelphia is remembered and recalled fondly. Just amazing. I think one of your gifts has been the ability to absorb other cultures other than the one you were raised in, and learn lessons from that and carry that back to an audience that normally doesn't get that experience. And I was just wondering, is there one lesson or one experience that sort of stands out from the things you've absorbed and learned from the Native Americans?
The whole history of civilization would be different if we only viewed those people we had conquered as having some information to share, instead of always rediscovering the proverbial wheel. The most profound learning I had in another culture was when I came to Indian country. I was a well-trained physician. I thought I knew everything. I was the hottest thing on the block. I couldn't wait to kind of come there and they taught me what it meant to be healthy and to be sick. I never learned that in medical school, what it meant to be healthy. In medical school, I learned what it meant to be sick. I was an expert in illness, pathology, the diagnosis of illness, and health was a diagnosis of exclusion. If you weren't sick, you were healthy.
Yeah.
In Indian country, this story that I am telling you, this new dance that I learned and that you have read about in my books, you got to open yourself up to hearing some new music. Otherwise, you keep doing the same dance steps. And we've already talked how easy it is just to keep doing it like you've done it. That sense of what it meant to be healthy, and the fact that they did not hold my degrees against me, was critically important. I had an old dude come to see me in the Santa Fe Indian Hospital. I had my diplomas on the wall, and he looked at those and he said, that's where you've been educated. I said, yeah, these are my credentials. And he looks up at the ceiling, and then he looks down at the floor, and he says, I don't see anything hanging up there. And I don't see anything embedded in the ground. But that doesn't mean that there is nothing to be learned from looking up and looking down. The idea that you can't just train the head with higher education that is endorsed by your credentialed experience, but that you have to open yourself up to looking up and down, that there's something to learn from everything. When I sat in the sweat lodge for the first time and they talked to those lava stones as if they were grandfathers, I mean, early in my experience, the power of that experience, of being able to hear in that steam the actual breath of those people who've had influence on you, the stories that have illumined your soul, that energetic presence was a life-changing experience. And it's where I learned how to pray. And when I talk about prayer, I'm not talking about a missal, a prayer book, Torah, commentary. Prayer, is that song that emerges from your heart, that uninhibited, spontaneous, truthful willingness to simply articulate in the moment the truth of what you're feeling, and to get in touch with that aspect of self that I had so often defended against. One, because I didn't want to see it, and two, because I didn't want to share it with anybody else who would see those parts of myself that I was afraid to look at more directly. Yeah, there's a lot of people and cultures to learn from. Stretch your boundaries, open yourself up to the many ways there are to hear the music and do the dance.
Right. One of the reasons travel is so crucial to our well-being as a race. The sooner we can visit our friends abroad, the better we will be.
Indeed, and we can do that electronically. We need to share that information personally. They need to see it and hear it from us, not just print it out and look at the test results and the reliability scores. They have to feel the essence. They have to trust who it is you are. It's as important as everything else you share. And I want to say before we leave, our experience together has always been, a valuable experience to me. That an organization interested in information, technology, and how to share it would tolerate this degree of deviance about how it is that we get in touch with our own information, our ability to share that, both inside, pay attention to it, honor and respect it,
Right.
and to transmit it in ways that ennoble the human spirit. I wish you well. It's been a delight again to be with you
Right.
whenever we do it, and to honor all of those who have been with us on this journey who are no longer with us. Many old friends.
Right.
Their light still shines.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. This is a wonderful experience. I know, speaking for the Regional Leadership Forum graduates and facilitators, that these are words that infiltrate our program and make it unique and give it the power that it does. And it's a long, lifelong contribution, and one that will not fade.
Thank you. I say it to all of you. Thank you for sharing my life with me. I say this
Right.
to all my relations. Mitakuye.
Very good. All right, I'm going to throw this back to Becky. I know she has a presentation to make.
I do. Thank you, Bob, and a special thanks to Dr. Hammerschlag for joining us today. On behalf of the St. Louis SIM chapter, I would like to present 2 checks. On my computer, I'm sorry. I would like to present
There you
2. Yeah, I'd like to present 2 checks.
Right.
There we go. I'd like to present 2 checks. In recognition of the SIM Foundation National Give Back Week, we have 2 $2,000 checks, one for the Healing Corps and one for the Kai Rain Foundation. These checks express our chapter's appreciation for Dr. Carl joining us and our support for such worthy organizations. I want to thank everyone for joining us today in support of SIM National Give Back Week. I hope all of you will also be joining the SIM National VIP reception event that will happen tomorrow, beginning at 2 p.m. Eastern. There's still time to register for the event. Just go to simnet.org/home. Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Very good. Have a good day.